Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's event. My name is Jude Blanchette, and I'm the Freeman Chair at China Studies here at CSIS. I'm very excited about today's discussion because I think we're going to be exploring a topic that is both blindingly obvious, but remains somewhat on the outskirts of the core discussion on the future of U.S.-China relations, as well as the unfolding strategic competition between the two countries. Typically, CSIS events don't have a core thesis, but I think this one does. And that is that the future security and prosperity of the United States depends to a large extent on how it thinks about and invests in human capital. I think we can also extend this thesis to China as well, and how Beijing is thinking about and investing in human capital will likewise play a decisive role in the country's future development. Human capital, which the World Bank defines as knowledge, skills, and health that people accumulate throughout their lives, is really at the core of any discussion of economic prosperity, technological innovation, national security, military capabilities, or any other component of the strategic rivalry or competition with China. And yet we find that all too often the discussion is focused on physical capital, or we're talking about semiconductor fabs or military capabilities without really thinking about the critical role that national investments in the skills, capabilities of our workforce, of our openness to attracting and keeping talent from around the world will play in determining our future. And of course, this bias also shows up in broader policy discussions of economic development more generally, with a favor towards capital over labor. And to quote a really good piece by Rana Faror at the Financial Times recently, in rich and poor countries alike, investments still focus primarily on physical capital. It's time to recognize that perhaps more than any other form, human capital is the infrastructure of the 21st century. And so with that throat clearing out of the way, I'm really delighted to be joined today by four fantastic guests. We're going to have a half-hour discussion right now with Congressman Andy Kim, and then at 9:30, I'm going to let him go do the business of a legislator, and then we're going to bring on three guests who I'll introduce at that time. But let me, in the interest of time, get right after it and extend a really, really warm welcome to Congressman Andy Kim, who represents New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District and sits on the House Armed Services Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and the House Small Business Committee. Prior to joining Congress in 2018, Congressman Kim had a really distinguished career at the U.S. State Department, including time spent in Afghanistan, where he was a civilian advisor to General David Petraeus and General John Allen. And then he went on to serve at the National Security Council under President Obama. So brings both a strong background as a practitioner of national security and now a legislator. So it's a really, really pleasure to have you here today, Congressman Kim. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Jude, for having me. Looking forward to it.
It's very early in the morning to start right off talking about human capital, but so we really appreciate your time, and I know you're busy and you've got votes galore this week. But I'd like to zoom out a bit before we talk specifically about what the United States can be doing to maintain its edge in attracting and developing human capital. More broadly in the U.S.-China relationship, how are you thinking about it right now? I know this is something you're doing a lot of reading and thinking and having discussions on. You know, what are the key dynamics that you see at play in the relationship now and moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Jude. I mean, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this. I'm really excited to be able to do this, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that the human capital side is something that we don't spend enough time thinking about. So we'll get into that in greater depth. But what we know is that I feel like so many of us understand that the United States-China relationship will be the defining relationship of the 21st century. We know that this has been a trajectory that many of us have been watching for quite a few years. I remember even coming when I was in Armed Services Committee, in 2019 starting out, this was certainly something that we were talking about in pretty much every single element of national security. But what I do have to also say is that 2020 and the pandemic in particular, in my opinion, has thrown some added complexity into this mix, and something that we need to kind of think through. How does that shape what we were already expecting? We were already talking about renewed great power competition. We were already talking about sort of a new era of global politics emerging. But then the pandemic happened. And I do think that that is something that should give us some pause and reevaluate, what we think is going to come next. I think the pandemic has more definitively ended the post 9/11 era of international politics and has moved us into an amorphous and unclear next phase that has a lot of fluidity to it right now. And it's uncertain exactly what that means, both in terms of reputational concerns regarding China and the challenges that they face. Also, who's going to come out of this pandemic stronger economically? Is this going to be an opportunity for the U.S. to reclaim some of our luster when it comes to allies and partners and other issues like that? But I think with just the defining element of this that I see is just that there are so many different perspectives of just how intense this competition with China will be. Some ranging from the element that this will be sort of a new Cold War type effort, which I don't agree with. As when and thinking through, what is the actual element between competition and cooperation and coexistence that we need to be thinking through in those three elements. So, I do want us to be very clear-eyed about where we stand vis-a-vis China. And I think we need to make sure, I think, you've said this and others have, that, we don't look at China as if they're 10 feet tall. We look at it for what it is, and try to make sure that we are being very sober about what is to come. So, I think that that's really on all of us to try to tackle.
Those of us who work in the Beltway or at think tanks or in government often have seems to me a fairly narrow band of discourse and discussion on the relationship with China. Overwhelmingly, the gravitational pull in the think tank world and the policy world is on great power competition. We're thinking about alliances and partners. You represent a district in New Jersey with citizens who come from all walks of life. I'm curious, what kind of conversations are you having about China and the relationship with China when you go back home on the weekends and over breaks? Does it overlap with the concerns that are predominant in DC about great power competition? Are there areas where folks are optimistic about the relationship with China? We're just often very divorced from what real America is thinking about China.
Yeah, well, I can assure you that when we're on the boardwalk in my district, no one's using the phrase "great power competition." I think the language that we have is certainly different, but that doesn't mean it's not on people's minds. I just had a telephone town hall the other day, and one of the people on the phone, she raised the issues about China. I think it's raised in a couple ways. The particular way it was raised over the town hall was about inferior products and safety concerns when it comes to China, about how China is so many of our products are coming from China, and concerns about whether or not the quality is up to standard, or if there's safety issues, especially when it comes to medicine and other products like that. So, that's something that, we've certainly seen in the news, echoed in past years. And so there is a deeper conception amongst at least people in my district, knowing that Chinese products are certainly becoming much more plentiful, and access into U.S. markets much more deep, but still a deep level of concern just about whether or not they're safe and whether or not this is something that should be up to speed for what they want. So that's something that I found interesting because I've heard it reflected quite a lot, and I think that gets at sort of a reputational issue of China that they're going to have to confront as they are now trying to move up the value chain of economies and trying to get into other industries, especially high tech industries. They're still going to have to contend with that reputational issue. The second aspect of this is about just broader economic security angles here. And I think that this is a place where the American people are hearing some echoes and reflections of what is talked about in DC or in New York or elsewhere in terms of just what exactly is the threat that China poses to America's economic superiority. It's vague though, and it's I think there's just this sense of dominance and rise. There's been a lot, especially in the I'd say in the previous 10 years, there's been a lot of narrative in the news about just a rising China. And that phrase rising China is something that I hear that kind of duality a lot, of China and rise. And so there's a lot of questioning of like you could probably ask it to the average American, does China have a bigger economy than the United States, or is China inevitable in terms of their rise? They're going to have very strong opinions about that, just in and of itself, though they may not know exactly what sectors are most competitive and might not know sort of where they stand in reality, but there is that growing conception. The last thing I'll just say is I do not see very much right now about concerns about China on like a military national security context. No one seems to be worried about that. They are aware of human rights concerns more vaguely. And I'll hear some questions time to time about Taiwan and Hong Kong. But there's not a lot of concern that this is going to be kind of like a Soviet style kind of competition as of now, at least. So that's something that we need to keep an eye on.
The second issue you raised is maybe where we can make a segue now to thinking about advantages the United States has in the realm of our investments and openness to developing human capital, but also from a perspective, if we stay within the framework of a competition with China. It strikes me, and this is a point that one of our guests at 9:30, Ryan Haas, makes all the time, that driving concerns and anxiety from the U.S. population about economic competition or even integration with China is a concern on how prepared we are for that competition, and a feeling that even integration with China is a zero-sum proposition. China's economic gain comes at the expense of job security for Americans, comes at the expense of other workaday concerns. And so maybe that's a good segue to ask you, what are we doing well right now in terms of preparing ourselves for a competition with China in the realm of investments we're making in human capital? And as you represent a district in New Jersey, where do you feel like the United States needs to put more focus on preparing workers, preparing citizens for the future, and essentially preparing them for the industries of the future? So long as we feel like we're in our back feet and we're not keeping up with the times, it will make China and competing with China seem like an insurmountable proposition. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Jude. I mean, I thought the premise that you used was really spot on and highlights some interesting tangents here. So, when you talk about that kind of zero-sum mentality, when you talk about the concerns about whether or not we're able to keep up when it comes to skill sets with China, it both gets at the sort of perception we have about where China is going and the kind of investments that they're making in training and skill sets and technology, et cetera. But it also, I have to say, highlights kind of like an insecurity and a struggle with confidence on the United States side about what we're doing. And I know we don't talk about that as much. We often talk about in the framework of China's investing, billions of dollars into this sector and their education system, this, their innovation efforts, that. And what that is inherently showing is that we have real confidence issues about whether or not we are doing the right thing as well, and whether or not we're doing the kind of investments that we need to. And I guess it gets at kind of a broader issue across all of our politics right now, which is I think we feel stuck. I think we feel stagnant right now as a country. I think we feel like we've seen several decades worth of political stagnation and stalemate. And we have gotten to the point where we struggle to think big. We watch China put together like massive campaigns and strategies saying that we're going to be the world leader in artificial intelligence by this date. We're going to be the world leader on renewable energies by this date. And right now, our politics is so dysfunctional that we've become so nearsighted. We're not able to think strategically. We're not able to have that kind of horizon effort. And even if we say we do, I think we lack the confidence to think that we can actually put behind it the kind of resource and cohesion and unity that is necessary to come up with a national strategy in that way. So when you look at, for instance, concerns about what our country's been investing in education has always been our strong suit. It is one of the things that has defined American strength. And I think right now, we don't feel particularly good about where we stand when it comes to especially STEM education and other elements there. But we're also struggling because we simultaneously want STEM education, but we're simultaneously saying that we still believe in the liberal arts approach, and that being approach that drives creativity and innovation. So we're stuck in this place where we think, we're unsure exactly where to go. And again, it doesn't have to be zero sum, but we often talk about it that kind of way in terms of trade-offs. And when I look at the main issues that we talk about when it comes to our strength, if you were to poll, people in DC and say, what's our biggest strength when it comes to our competition with China, I think most people would probably say innovation, probably say entrepreneurship, that, what has driven us as a country has been being the forefront leader on so many things. But the issue now is we don't know if we're going to continue that. And I think that that's what the whole 5G, a big part of the 5G battle was about. Yes, there are security concerns about that. Yes, there are other issues, but I think we just felt like, wow, is this a moment where now we're seeing a major element of innovation being captured by a different country? And, I don't want to necessarily call that like a Sputnik moment, but I think it was a wake up call for us to identify, like, what is it that we actually want to be the innovative leaders of? And now can we put the effort behind it to achieve that? And so that's going to be a defining question, something I feel a tremendous amount of pressure on in Congress to see if we can answer that. And I'm hoping that that is the kind of impetus that kind of gets us back into focus, and recognizing that we cannot sustain another 10 years of stagnation as a country and expect to be on top.
That's a great point on, and again, we always seem to use either Chernobyl moment or Sputnik moment. We always have Soviet references, but I wanted to drill down on that a bit. Two questions. The first is, to what extent can the challenge of China be productively channeled to make investments in the United States that allow us to unstick? And how do we do so in a way where we're smart in the investments, and I think critically, where we're not exacerbating longstanding xenophobic tendencies in the United States to treat to other, or we're currently, as you're working very hard on, we're currently in a bout of a very, very sad state of anti-Asian violence and racism, which is, I think, inarguably related to the whip up and the frenzy over China, whether that's on COVID-19 or as a side effect of great power competition, and pointing to China as almost an existential threat to the United States. But recognizing the political utility of nothing motivates like a challenge and a threat. So how do you think about walking that line as a practitioner and as someone who's deeply concerned with anti-API racism and violence?
Yeah, I think that what you said about, how do we motivate progress? How do we motivate getting to the next stage? And so much of that right now, we live in a place of negative politics where the motivation and the way in which we try to move things forward is through kind of finding a scapegoat, finding some other element to blame. Whether that's when you're talking about, for instance, the economy and jobs, whether that's trying to blame immigrants for the problem, or trying to blame China for the problem, or trying to blame the bad state level practices and budgeting or things like that. There's it's always kind of this element of trying to figure out, like, and trying to identify what's going to resonate with people, who's the boogeyman on that front. I'm not saying it's not okay to do at some point in terms of recognizing how it is that we can move forward and motivate our country, but we need to be very careful about that kind of rhetoric. And also, I think that that's what feeds into some of the rhetoric that I see, especially coming out from some of my colleagues on the Hill, that often talks about the China threat. I think in words that I think are unproductive, or exaggerate or distort what the actual concern is, because there's a benefit to some people to try to make it seem like a much more existential threat than it is, in order to try to make their case and try to motivate things. So there's a distortion there that is occurring, that is being utilized for trying to amplify certain political arguments, and that's something that we need to be very careful about and very cognizant to. When it comes to how we are able to make that argument in a more pragmatic way, I do think that that framework of saying, what is it that the United States needs to do to continue to be the global leader that it wants to be. Kind of framing it in that way has been very productive in my district. When, for instance, when I talk about climate change issues, I mean, my district's a district that President Trump won twice. So I'm one of only 7 Democrats left in the country representing a district Trump won. And I find it very interesting to hear how people talk about certain types of issues, especially more polarized issues. But when you talk about climate change, one of the best ways to talk about climate to conservatives in my area is talking about how, wouldn't we all agree that we want America to be the energy leader of the future? Isn't that something that we can agree upon? It doesn't necessarily say that China is the problem, but it just sets out a positive objective that we're trying to achieve. And, that kind of approach, I think, is one that is not utilized very often. It's not pushed forward as much as it should. But you see some of this with how President Biden's talking about infrastructure, talking about it as something necessary for the global competition vis-a-vis China. And I think that's a frame that, again, should be amplified more. We'll see if it has resonance. I personally think it does. But there's so many divisions, especially domestically now, that make it hard for such an argument to break through.
One of the unfortunate trend that the United States and China now share after our recent Census Bureau numbers is that both countries are now facing a population shrinkage, or at least a downward trajectory. That was an area where the United States felt like it had a structural advantage over China, which has long been facing some demographic headwinds. One of the ways, though, that the United States has an advantage over China in arresting the fall of a population, native-born population, is we let other people in. It's called immigration. China does not have a particularly robust or open immigration system. The United States long has, although we're seeing calls for more restrictive immigration policies. I wonder how you think about, again, within the framing of competition, global competition, competition of innovation, what role do you see immigration playing, and what investments should we be making, or changes should we be making to immigration to exploit the advantages that it can give to the United States in competition with China?
Yeah, Jude, this is a really important distinction. I mean, you're right. The census data that we received in the United States, had some areas for alarm. But we also saw census data come out about China in recent days, and they are struggling, in similar ways. But the tricky thing here, first of all, is that this is a tough area of comparison, just given how how significantly different we are just in terms of sheer population size. But that doesn't mean that some of these trends aren't important. When you talk about immigration, yes, that is and has always been a strategic strength of ours, and that it has been one of the greatest areas of political debate and frankly hostilities, and a place where we have really stagnated. By the lack of a comprehensive immigration reform effort in our country has really stagnated this and allowed this to become the kind of political landmine that it has now become, and that's going to hurt us if we talk about that. First of all, there's just it talks about, like, the way it's talked about in general right now, immigration, it's as if it's like monolithic, and we fail to understand the nuances of the different reasons and ways that people come to the United States. And it's now being kind of bundled in. All of immigration is somehow tied in now with the challenges that we have with our southern border. And I think that puts us at a severe disadvantage in how we communicate this to the American people. And if we continue to think about it in just this overly simplistic way, again, this will be losing out on a strategic advantage of ours. I also think about it in terms of, for instance, we have a lot of debate and concerns about whether it's Chinese born students come to the United States to study, and other angles like that. That is something that I've seen a level of deep hostility that really borderlines, if not crosses, xenophobia. And I worry about that as an Asian American. I also worry about that because we want to be bringing in the best and the brightest from all over the world. And we shouldn't be hamstringing ourselves in terms of that innovation. There are ways that we can do it that will allow us to be secure. There are ways to do that try to minimize concerns, and we have to do a lot to fundamentally reshape security clearance efforts in the U.S. and other things like that have been preventing the kind of public-private synergies that we should be when it comes to innovation and immigration. But to the point that you're saying, that argument about immigration being used as a tool to be able to help us in this competition with China, that argument is not really made. That kind of strategic argument is not being made. I mean, we're looking at a situation where by 2050, the United States could potentially add another 41 million people due to immigration, whereas China would lose about 13 million people due to emigration. So you see how this can be a place where we can lean in on and find ways to be able to utilize that this strength and innovation in our country. But again, that argument is not being made right now, and I don't know if we can really break this deadlock on immigration. I say that very frankly. As someone who's fighting these fights every day in Congress, I'm not sure what's going to actually be able to break this dam and allow us to have some forward momentum. And if we continue to fail on that, I do think that this is going to be something that we're going to regret, a decade or two down the road.
I've only got you for another minute, so I wanted to ask a final blue sky question outside of any political constraints, which is, as you go back and have conversations at your home district, and you think about what we can do to essentially prepare our workforce to not be scared of the future and to feel like they can thrive in new technologies, in an era of automation, in an era of continued globalization. What do you think will be the critical piece for preparing our workforce? What's the kind of investment you think we should be making, or priority we should have that isn't politically feasible or possible right now?
Well, first of all, I want us to have a mindset that we can do this, that we can actually accomplish this. And I always say that, the opposite of democracy is apathy. And I'm starting to feel this sad sense of apathy kind of coming into the fray, where after, again, just decades worth of political fighting and toxicity, that I think people, I just feel the sense that people are just like, I don't know if we can do what we used to do, and this kind of, again, this lack of confidence. We need to find a way to break through that and have a reinvigorated sense of confidence about what America in the 21st century is capable of, and trying to focus in on our strengths and remind ourselves of the grit that we have. So there's a certain mindset there, but I think that can't just come from just thin air. It requires something to be able to rally around, and that's why I do think efforts like this infrastructure investment that we're trying to put forward, something that's not just about something that is both tangible but also emotional, in terms of recognizing that we're rebuilding America, that we're getting us a new foundation, that we're giving us a new jumping off point, and that this is not just about the the roads, bridges, and tunnels, but to the point of this talk that we have, it's about the human capital. It's about investing in a new generation of skill sets, putting the kind of resources we need to, both in terms of trade schools, apprenticeships, as well as four-year college, as well as thinking about, more broadly, how we connect the dots between some of the shifting sectors in our economy, and really demonstrating that we're going to be able to drive that. Those dots are just theoretical right now. We actually need to connect those dots and show that we can take, kind of more traditional forms of energy jobs and transform them into renewable energy jobs. That is something that we can't just go to a working family and say, like, trust us, this is going to happen. We actually have to do it and create a thick black line there connecting those dots. We're not there yet, and we need, hopefully, this kind of effort that we're doing in Congress to push that forward, and really give us something tangible to rally around, and the resources behind it to be able to show America what a positive vision of the future should look like. So much of what we are worried about right now is sort of like these apocalyptic scenarios about climate change, or China dominating the world. What we need to try to do is come up with a positive vision, something that we want to aspire towards, something that an America that I want to raise my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old in. That's something that we're missing right now.
Well, I said I'd get you off at 9:30, and it's 9:32. But it was worth the extra 2 minutes for that, because I think that is both an empirical reality that the United States has extraordinary advantages, which should make it optimistic about its ability to help shape a peaceful, productive 21st century. But also just reminding American citizens that, as bad as things are, if we're thinking about competition with China, we are still in the lead. The lead may be narrowing, but we need to recognize that we have enduring strengths and tools in the toolkit, immigration being one of them, that are sources of profound resiliency, robustness, and strength that require investment. And so I wholeheartedly agree, and I appreciate all that you are doing, both in the trenches, but also I think the narrative and the message and rhetoric that you're putting out of optimism, not blind optimism, but empirically grounded optimism in United States resilience. So thank you very much for your 33 minutes this morning. And I know you've got votes coming up, and I know that you're probably going to schlep back to New Jersey. So I'm gratefully appreciative for your time, and hope to have future conversations on this important topic with you.
Yeah, thank you, Jude, and thanks CSIS, and thanks everyone for tuning in. So I'll turn it back to you. Take care.
Great. Well, we're now to follow up on that conversation. We've got a great panel. We're going to try and cram in a lot in the next 45 minutes. So hopefully folks will start appearing on the screen. I'll start the introductions. Three friends and three experts and scholars who I admire a great deal thinking on these issues. First, I'm joined by Yingyi Ma, who is an Associate Professor of Sociology at Syracuse University, and is the author of a really, really excellent and award-winning, I just found out, book published by Columbia University Press last year called Ambitious and Anxious: How Chinese Undergraduates Succeed and Struggle in American Higher Education. Also joined by Kaiser Kuo, I don't think he needs much of an introduction, but the host of the Sinica Podcast, and I've dubbed the unofficial mayor of Chapel Hill. And finally, joined by Ryan Hass, who's the Michael Armacost Chair in Foreign Policy at Brookings Institution, and the author of also an excellent book, and one that is very apposite for our discussion today, called Stronger: Adapting America's China Strategy in an Age of Competitive Interdependence. I took away 4 minutes from our panel discussion, just wrapping up there. So I want to be economical of time. And Ryan, I thought, given Congressman Kim's final remarks, I thought maybe you'd be a natural transition here, because his final 2 minutes really is the theme of your book and a lot of your work. And I wanted to ask you, the predominant consensus right now seems to be that we're losing. Again, I don't want to quibble over the utility of a competitive framework. I want to take that as a given for the sake of our conversation today. And I think most people think we're losing. We're getting our butts kicked. We're getting our lunch eaten, pick your metaphor. And indeed, I think another sub-consensus is that openness that the United States system has, whether that's in immigration, or a rule of law-based system which treats people as innocent until proven guilty. A lot of these core underpinnings and values of the United States are perceived by many to be liabilities as we confront China. You and I have talked a lot about, or at least traded emails on, that great final paragraph from George Kennan in his long telegram, where he says, something to the effect of the greatest threat that the United States has is that it becomes like the Soviet Union as it tries to compete against it. So I wanted to basically ask you a very leading question here. I wanted to get your thoughts, essentially pivoting off of what the congressman said, on, are we losing, and is our openness the liability that I think many see it as? You're coming to this as a longtime practitioner of national security, focusing on China. How do you look at this?
Well, Jude, thank you for setting up that conversation. Look, the United States has 4% of the world's population. China has 4 times the American population. Yet, in spite of that, 7 of the 10 most valuable companies in the world are in the United States. 12 of the 20 most valuable tech companies are in the United States. 7 of the 10 most valuable life sciences companies are in the United States. 5 of the top 10 universities in the world are in the United States. And I can go on, but the point, I think, is clear. And the question we need to ask ourselves is why? Why is America so fortunate to have such an abundance of riches? The conclusion I've come to over years of looking at this is that our advantage is our brain gain. We're able to attract the best and the brightest minds from around the world to want to be in the United States and work in the United States and live in the United States. And what is it that allows us to do that and advantage ourselves against competition with China and everyone else? I think there are a few elements to it. I think that having a culture of innovation where laws are transparent and predictable helps. I think having deep and liquid capital markets where we're able to attract the most capital from anywhere in the world helps. I think having the best universities helps. I think creating incentives for research and development that sort of push forward that innovation help, but also this constant quest to live up to our values of who we are, and to recognize that racism repels rather than attracts the people that we want to come to our shores to strengthen ourselves. So that's the formula. It's worked pretty darn well for a long time for the United States. I would hate to see us abandon it now, because as you said, we still have strong advantages in our competition with China. And if we can continue to build on that formula and protect and improve it, I think we'll be just fine in our ability to compete with China or anyone else.
Ryan, I'm going to come back to you. I want to throw a question at Yingyi, but then I want to come back to you, and I want to just to give you time to think. I wanted to ask you, yes, but, and the but is there's clear demonstrated cases where U.S. openness is allowing in nefarious actors who have designs to steal IP, who are exploiting the openness the United States has to engage in espionage. These are very real concerns. These have a real impact. My view is always need to look at both sides of the balance sheet. Right now, we're only looking at the negative side of the balance sheet. So we're quantifying the espionage. The more intangible asset side of the balance sheet is the contribution of this openness to overall U.S. prosperity and security. But I do want to make sure we're focusing on what we can do to protect, to ensure openness. So I wanted to come back to you in a minute on that. But Yingyi, I thought I immediately thought of reaching out to you to join this event because one of your key areas of research has been a really deep, nuanced understanding of why Chinese students are coming to the United States, the role that immigrants play in STEM in the United States. This is an area of gross simplification in popular discourse and in the media. And again, what I just said to Ryan, we often look at only one side of the balance sheet here, which is there are absolutely cases of espionage. There are cases of individuals who are violating grant agreements by also getting money from talent programs. But I think there's an assumption right now that Chinese students, especially students coming to get advanced degrees in STEM, are coming with ill designs or coming with the intention of simply gaining these skills and then immediately going back to serve the motherland. I wanted to ask you, why are students coming to the United States, and what does the data show about what they're doing once they graduate? Are they all immediately heading back to China to serve Beijing, or is the reality, this is another leading question, as you can tell, or is the reality more complex?
Thank you so much, Jude. All very important questions. So I want to start from the first. Why do they want to study here? The reason is very simple. Just like Ryan said, the United States has the best and the largest number of universities, ranked very high in the world's the best 100 universities. Like, for example, ranking is really the most important factor for Chinese students' college choice. And among the world's best 100 universities, China only has 3. When I was writing the book, it has only 2, Tsinghua University and Peking, and now it has 3. United States has over 40. And now Chinese students, of course, not just zero in on the first 100, they're probably are looking at the first 500. The United States has a lot more choices for them. So this is one thing. The flip side is they're actually very much within China, the education system is grinding, is super competitive. So in other words, even the best universities in China are not accessible to them. They have to go through this super competitive Gaokao, the Chinese college entrance examination that is highly standardized, only once a year, super competitive. So most of the Chinese students are really shut out of those kinds of high quality education opportunities. So talking about the strength of the US system, I think higher education is the most obvious strength that the US still holds. We're not losing, we're still winning far stretch in terms of higher education. So your second question, so after they get their degree, what do they do? So the most recent data showing, focusing on the doctoral students, the Chinese doctoral students stay rate in 2018 is still over 80%. So that is actually a fall a decade ago. So in other words, the trend is that there is increasing number of Chinese doctoral students going back to China. But back in 2005, 92% of Chinese doctoral students stay in the United States after getting their doctoral degree. We have, that's the national data. We have NSF really tracking those students, the survey of earned doctorates. So China is, the stay rate among the Chinese doctoral students is the highest, followed by India. And that rate has declined to 85% just 2 or 3 years ago in 2018. So in other words, a large majority of students do stay. And our current immigration policy only push them return to China. And I just mentioned the doctoral students because that's the best survey and data we do have nationally. So in my book, I studied undergraduate students. Because when we're talking about the rise of China, I do believe the undergraduate students from China, they embody the rise of China. Why? Because they study here largely using their own family funds. The doctoral students oftentimes funded by American higher education. That was the case 20, 30, 40 years ago. That was not new. What is new is really captured by this new wave of Chinese undergraduate students. In my survey, over 90% use their family funds. Talking about the pricey American higher education tuition, that is the change of China, the rising upper middle class family. that is very much embody the rise of China. And they're able to finance the most expensive American higher education at undergraduate level. Among this population, the intention to return to China is much higher than at the doctoral level. So in other words, you're really talking about the student body coming from different segments of Chinese society. At undergraduate level, they're coming from a much wealthier, much more privileged family backgrounds in China. At the doctoral level, you're really coming from students. You're really capturing students from very ordinary family backgrounds, even rural family backgrounds. So those are really what we're talking about, the best and brightest. And now, the US immigration policies are not friendly to them in terms of retaining these best and brightest.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Yingyi? Because it strikes me that we're thinking about this. The United States doesn't quite understand that it's in a competition with China for this brain power. We tend to think of a lot of these talent programs that China is putting in place as part of this, whole of government strategy that everyone is complicit in to serve the motherland. But in fact, they're a response to brain drain, that Beijing is seeing its best and its brightest go out of, as you say, outside of some pockets of excellence in the Chinese education system. Once you're outside of Renmin University, Peking University, Tsinghua, Shanghai Normal, once you're out of a really small group of schools, quality deteriorates significantly, prestige deteriorates significantly. So I wanted to ask how Beijing is thinking about responding to this brain drain, and what can the United States do to outcompete Beijing for keeping this talent? Because they're either staying in the United States, they're going to China, or they're going to third countries. The United States probably has a large amount of leverage over determining who gets to capture that brain power.
So, I think the emphasis on the talent program is very much misunderstanding the kind of population the talent program is really targeting. If you're looking at those high-profile cases, and I think there has been a recent study showing that the average age, the median age of the talent program recipients, they're really in the age of 50s. So in other words, those are the established academics and scientists, not the Chinese students that, the Congress is really pondering about limiting this to some extent late adolescents and early, those students at the age of 20s. So those are the population that the Chinese talent program is targeting. They're not even accomplished yet, right? They're trying to get the training and they're trying to get their career started. So actually, when I was doing my research, I do have a survey item and asking why they want to study here. The overwhelming reason they want to study here is they think the US education is going to benefit their career start. So they're focusing on career start. That's not the focus of the Chinese talent program recruitment. So in terms of brain drain, I think China has lost a lot of brain power over the past few decades and still continuing to do so. If you're looking at what we're talking about, the stay rate of Chinese doctoral graduates, the overwhelming Chinese doctoral graduates stay in the United States. And I'm not even talking about the different fields of study. The over 80% is the overall doctoral graduates. So if you're looking at STEM graduates, the stay rate is even higher because people like me in sociology and other social science and humanities, it's just darn hard to get a job in the United States. So it's, if you're looking at the fields of study, the stay rate among Chinese doctoral students in STEM fields is even higher than the 80%. I don't really have the specific number. So you do the math, and the brain drain that China has lost talent to the United States over the past few decades and continue to do so is quite pronounced.
Kaiser, that's a good segue to what I wanted to ask you, which is the case seems to me, again, I'm going to come back to Ryan in a minute on how do we ensure that we're plugging gaps and we're protecting our national security. There of course is a cost to openness. No one is denying that. but it's weighing it against the benefits. Given what Yingyi was just saying about we're winning the brain drain competition with China, and essentially the best and the bright. I sent to you yesterday, CSIS did an event with Eric Schmidt on that National Security Commission on AI. And one of the points I thought he made well is, it is the case that the best and brightest in China who want to work in AI come to the United States and stay here. We're attracting them. It's a better ecosystem. It's a better lifestyle. Job prospects are for the time being better. Given all that, we're seeing now some calls in Congress for some pretty severe restrictions on STEM students coming to the United States, which I think, as our conversation indicates, is mind-bogglingly stupid from just a national security perspective. The United States has long had a xenophobic streak, and especially with its shameful treatment of immigrants from China, visitors from China. This dates back well into the 19th century. But we're now seeing another spike in anti-Chinese and anti-Asian racism. Simultaneously, we've got this call in Congress and in the public sphere to really normalize calls for excluding whole groups of Chinese students from coming to the United States. So I wanted to ask you, what the heck is driving this current round of exclusionist thinking? And from your own perch, having worked in the tech sector, working right now in an area that is just a critical component of higher education excellence and innovation excellence. So you're a firsthand observer of this. What's driving this, and what is the cost that the United States is paying for this round of xenophobia?
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange. How hard really is it to understand that, what the United States needs to do to attract and to retain this talent is just continue to make the United States a welcoming, tolerant land where, personal talents and hard work are actually rewarded, where families can flourish, and where the kids have the best possible educational opportunities available to them. I mean, they will naturally and very willingly and stay here and pledge their loyalties to this country. It's just sort of a no-brainer. What's driving it? I think Congressman Kim really put his finger on it, and I'm sure Ryan can expand on this because it's such a major theme in his book. It's just this loss of confidence, this insecurity that Congressman Kim talked about, and that's at the heart of it. I'm not talking just about the sort of declinism that may be sort of residue of the Great Recession, or even political polarization, gridlock, dysfunction, the feeling of being stuck, I think, is how Congressman Kim put it. But what really has saddened and alarmed me, and I think is at the heart of this, is the erosion of confidence in our institutions, their ability to actually function as intended, whether we're talking about intelligence, or our diplomats or our academic institutions. It's loss of confidence in our experts, and for me, most alarmingly and most importantly, in those values that we were talking about. I mean, I think that this crisis of confidence has rendered a lot of Americans really vulnerable to the kind of paranoid xenophobes, who are peddling this noxious, and as I think we all agree, ultimately self-defeating set of ideas when it comes to China. I think that, so this uptick in anti-Asian hate crime is obviously the most, pernicious of its effect and most immediate of its effects. But so that has resulted, I think, in, ethnic profiling under the auspices of the DOJ's China initiative, in a precipitous negative turn in attitudes toward the U.S. and the decline, as Yingyi was just talking about, in the Remain rates, into a flight of intellectual human capital, which I think arguably is the most important kind. So, I mean, it's Joe Nye talked about how, soft power, ever the American asset, is simply the power of attraction rather than coercion or payments. And there's nothing that is more unattractive than a person who lacks confidence. As our confidence declines, I think that we just simply lose the ability to draw in and retain all that vital human capital. And worse yet, there are, as you say, people who are actively working to prevent even those who are still attracted to the U.S., despite all our flaws, from coming here and studying and working and living. And I think that they are just shooting us directly in the foot for that.
I want to say, as a follow-up, Kaiser, and you and I were talking about this yesterday on the phone, that I may be more comfortable with the competitive framing of the U.S.-China relationship than I think, than I know you have some well thought out reservations about it. But one of the elements, it seems to me, that is widely acknowledged is a competition over values. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on exploring this more deeply. That there seems to me we are, and even those who are part of the discussion and debate who are pushing for more exclusionist policies still seem to say that this is a debate over values or a competition over values. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, if we continue to go down the road, which is, as we say, self-defeating from protecting our own national security and prosperity, it also seems to have a depressing effect on one of the other advantages the United States has, or should have, or could have, which is as a real standout in holding up values of openness and tolerance, which remain overwhelmingly globally widely more appealing than the value system that the Communist Party of China is holding up. So again, a leading question: why aren't we leaning in on that more?
Right. I mean, and that's what puzzles me, and it really vexes me. I mean, look, if we don't uphold this country's core values, the openness and the tolerance, the equality under law, all of the things that we've all talked about here, what the hell are we even fighting for? I mean, that's something I sincerely believe is that the whole point is that we want to uphold these inherently noble values. We want them to prevail, right? So these values themselves are the one thing that cannot be sacrificed as an expedient in the name of competition. At one level, you can just point to the inanity of this sort of, we had to burn the village in order to save it. But that's actually, slightly missing the point. I think that, even if we accept our relationship with China is going to be primarily defined by competition, as you say, and let's provisionally accept that. It's just a no-brainer. We have to let that osmotic gradient work its magic. We need to continue to allow, them to come. I don't believe that it is a zero-sum game, that every, scientist or technologist who comes here and lends strength to us, subtract the same quantum of strength from China. I actually think that, everyone gains from that. But yeah, you're right. And I think, it's what you said. If you're only looking at one side of the balance sheet, if you're only looking at the costs, what the hell kind of an accountant are you? I mean, you need to look at the benefits as well. And to me, it's just, to use your phrase, blindingly obvious that the benefits vastly outweigh those costs. Which isn't to say we should be cavalier about the costs.
Yeah, and that's I wanted to, Ryan, I'd like to bring you back in to, even if you're looking at both sides of the ledger, any company worth its salt will try to minimize losses as it tries to maximize its profit. And it seems we can and should do both at the same time, especially given the increasingly sophisticated way in which China is able to exfiltrate hard-earned American IP, which is really powering not only much of our innovative capacity, but increasingly a lot of these technologies that are being really innovated here in the United States have dual use purposes. And so it is not an insignificant concern about how do we ring fence and protect core, critical and emerging technologies. So I wanted to ask for your thoughts on how one can strike that balance and what the United States can be doing to better protect our national security, given that the story right now is really a national security centric story, where it's looking almost exclusively at the downsides. So we have to do much better in protecting our national security if we're going to maintain an open system, it strikes me. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Well, you've put your finger on a really important issue, and I don't have a snappy solution to this problem. I think part of the challenge is that it's easier to quantify losses or risks than it is to qualify the intangible gains that we've been talking about over the past half hour. But taking that as it is, I fully agree with your point that we need to be able to look at both the costs and the benefits and hold them against each other to minimize the former and maximize the latter. And one of the ways that we can minimize the costs and risks is to become a bit more judicious in the way that we talk about these problems. Framing them as a whole of society threat is just a log on the fire of racism. It's unhelpful. It's counterproductive to what it is that we're trying to do, which is to identify where the threats are, and they are real threats. There is espionage taking place, and we do want our security services to be ferreting it out. But the more that we can do so in a precise, judicious, fact-based manner, I think the more success we will have in that enterprise. At the same time, we need to keep sight of the gains that we're accruing from this balance. Chinese students do help raise performance because they increase competitiveness in our classrooms. As Yingyi was saying, many of them stay in the United States and write leading papers, push forward the innovation frontier on artificial intelligence and other things. They are, the lifeblood of innovation in our society in many ways. And even those that do return to China, they return with an awareness of what the United States really is, which makes them, I think, much less susceptible to propaganda and sort of caricatures about the United States when they go back. But I did just want to offer one thought, which is a lesson of history that I don't want us to lose sight of. And it's the case of Qian Shui-sen. Many of you probably know him. He was a leading thinker. He came to the United States in the 1930s on a scholarship, went to MIT, then went to Caltech, joined the Manhattan Project, contributed to the development of our capabilities to win World War II. Around the time of the McCarthy era, he was swept up in a witch hunt and accused of having communist sympathies, a charge that was never proven. He was pushed out of our country against his will, sent back to China. He became, the father of China's nuclear program, its space program, and its missile program. And so I guess the question I would ask is, do we want the next Qian Shui-sen in the United States or in China? From where I sit, I would much rather have these bright, ambitious, strong-willed people contributing to American prosperity and American national security than having them leaving our countries after accruing the talents that we've invested in them.
And just as a thought on that, Ryan, which I also agree with, on one of the practical deficiencies of a strategy that sees risks everywhere is it's very hard to prioritize. And in a world of time and resource scarcity, the United States will be a better protector of its national security when we've defined the critical areas that are of foremost concern and learned to deprioritize others. This is what's always struck me about the Confucius Institute discussion as relatively unproductive, in the sense that it has taken on a size in the overall discussion that is not merited by the concerns that one has, and that comes at a zero-sum relationship with the amount of time we can be focusing on areas of greater concern. And so I think there's a lot the United States needs to do on, in fact, upgrading our ability to protect national security, as well as, by the way, increasing the awareness that our tech companies have about espionage and IP theft. American universities, which for a long time were able to not have many rules or policies in place, also need to upgrade and up their game to make sure that that they are doing their bit to protect national security. We've only got about 7 or 8 minutes left, and I wanted to end on a productive note, which is asking the three of you for suggestions on if we're recognizing that this is our skill stack and that our openness and investments in human capital are one of the defining features of or core components of U.S. strategic advantage if in the competition with the United States. Where do we put more money and time into? What are the things that are going to give us the most bang for their buck? And so, I just wanted to go quickly around the room. Yingyi, from your perspective, looking at how the United States, frankly, to put it in somewhat zero-sum terms, how can we continue to win the brain drain race between us and Beijing? What steps could the United States take to further incentivize the best and the brightest to come to the United States, integrate into our educational systems, and stay and remain here and become productive contributors to U.S. prosperity and national security?
Sure. Jude, I want to push back a little on that zero-sum framework in terms of the competition for talent. So I think there's a strong perception in the American public discourse in terms of how, for example, Chinese students has taken away the seats from American students. The most recent research has shown, actually by a Princeton researcher, quantify how international student increase actually has helped funded American higher education, which has helped their recruitment for domestic students, especially for the financial aid programs. And we all know that from my research, 98% of Chinese students are not having access to financial aid and merit-based scholarship here in the United States. So in other words, their tuition has helped American higher education expand the pie, basically, and sponsor the domestic higher education recruitment, especially for students from disadvantaged family backgrounds. So that's one example of how this is not zero sum. The other example is I have to bring the K-12 education into this framework here. We haven't really talked so much about K-12 education. And we have to say, when we're talking about how American education system is still their strength, it's really at the stage of higher education. K-12 education is largely broken. Congress Kim has talking about how STEM education is a problematic. Here is a couple of statistics. In America, we only produce 20% of our first degree, bachelor's degree graduates, 20% of them major in STEM fields. In China, among first degree holders, 33%, 1/3 of bachelor's degree go to engineers. So in other words, the STEM education is far more prioritized, basically. So in terms of college major choice, it's not just the demand, but also supply, right? So it's really chosen by the Chinese students. They value and prioritize science and engineering from K to 12. We are not. Science engineering is not, it has a huge pipeline issue. If you're not getting ready in K to 12, it's very hard to simply major in science engineering and becoming a artificial intelligence expert if you do not have a solid foundation in K to 12. So to a great extent, Chinese international students at both undergraduate and graduate level has really populated. If you're looking at our higher education scientist labs and research labs, you have seen a lot of international students, and a big part is from China. So, so yeah, I would just end that. I think, it's very important to continue attracting international students and better retain them. And I would actually very much support Eric Schmidt's point that we need to separate high-skilled immigration from this whole immigration policy. And high-skilled immigration for the United States is an absolute positive gain.
Great, thanks, Yingyi. Yeah, great points. Kaiser, suggestion on how we can deepen the human capital talent pool, how we can widen it, how we can extend it, how we can extract more gains from it.
Well, the great thing about it is we very recently were so very good at it. We just need to stop subverting it. Look, this isn't an argument that's particularly difficult to win. It just needs to be had more often, prioritized and participated in by more of us. I mean, it's so consonant with our shared values, and these cross-party lines, they are, fundamentally American values. The other side is really easy to tar, and deservedly, with the brush of small-mindedness, of parochialism, of xenophobia, of racism, of short-sightedness. This is something that we win in the public discourse. And, one of the great things that I think a lot of people are attracted to in America is that there is a mechanism by which public opinion can translate into policy in this country. Look, as it happens, the people who are on our side in this, and this is such a no-brainer that, anyone with two brain cells to rub together is pretty much on our side in this. They're disproportionately influential. These are the people who are writing op-eds anyway, so write the op-ed. I'll get out there and argue this point. It's just, it's an easy one to win. It's a layup.
Yeah. Ryan, for the three-pointer, what can we do, either tangible or intangible, to continue to build an advantage on human capital and extend it?
Well, Jude, I'll just put a few ideas on the table and I welcome your reaction to them. The first is building upon a point that Kaiser made earlier, regain our national confidence. We stand in a much stronger position relative to China, and we need to recall that every once in a while. And you made this point as well, but doing so is important because it allows us to have a cool, calm, wise approach to managing the competition and relationship rather than being anxiously reactive and defensive to everything that's taking place. We can afford to do that. Second, I think that it helps us to recognize the limits and boundaries of the competition that we have with China. And I think that the Biden administration in recent weeks has been trying to demarcate this line a little bit more clearly, saying, for example, that we are not pursuing a new Cold War with China. I think that's healthy. To try to focus in a little bit more on what it is that we are competing over and what it is that we're not. And related to that, I think it's helpful for us to avoid scapegoating, and as Congressman Kim was emphasizing, have an affirmative view of and vision for America and America's place in the world. What are we building towards? Why does it matter? The more that we can sort of operate on that terrain, I think the stronger of a standing that we're going to have. Final thought, I guess, is that it's also worthwhile, I think, for us to just keep in mind as a caution the past patterns that have emerged over American history. When there is rising nationalism and increasing great power competition, racism often follows. We saw this against the Germans around World War I, the internment of the Japanese during World War II, the curtailment of civil liberties in the early period of the Cold War, and also some of the anti-Muslim sentiment that flared after September 11th. We need to try to break this cycle, and I hope that these conversations can help us to do so. But ultimately, innovation comes from people, and the more that we can get the smartest people in the world wanting to live and work and contribute to the American national enterprise, the stronger of a position that we're going to be in. We know how to do this. We've done this before. We need to do it again.
Well, those are all excellent thoughts, and I appreciate everyone's contribution to this topic. I think this is one where we should be having. This should be a topic we return to again and again and again. This also strikes me as an area of, again, competition with China where we could see a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. If we're framing the competition as one in which two different political communities are competing for who can attract the most to come and live and work and contribute, this requires that the United States become more tolerant, more open. This actually necessitates that the United States become better about protecting some of its underlying national security, I think, in key important areas. But as you say, Ryan, I think this comes through pretty strongly in your book. Just stopping for a moment to reflect on the extraordinary endowments and strategic advantages that the United States has. And this is one where, unlike some of the policy discussions occurring right now, which will be very expensive, very political, think of something like industrial policy that require a lot of moving parts. Living up to our values is one where it's relatively cheap to just make yourself more attractive, to where when a student or an individual is deciding at the margin, do I go to Toronto or do I go to Chicago? They're going to be operating in many ways on subjective understanding and views of tolerance and opportunity. And this is one where it's relatively cheap to enforce and create a virtuous cycle where we are the political tribe and community where individuals want to come and participate and engage in. So I hope this is one where, as we continue to think about whatever you want to call it, great power rivalry, strategic competition with China, we continue to center the investments we make in human beings and how we can make their lives more productive. So again, thank you very much. And thanks to everyone for watching. Please direct angry emails to me. My email address is on the CSIS website, and I hope we can continue to have a discussion on this really important topic. So Yingyi, Kaiser, Ryan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jude.